The learning philosophy perspective is probably one of my favorite components of the entire DLL program, and uh, probably because I'm a learning theorist. I've been studying learning for a long time, but also because I really do enjoy reading through your thinking process and your development process, and seeing your realization of where you land when it comes to some significant ideas. And so when you look at the assignment, the questions that we pose and the things that we have you explore are really designed to get you to start thinking about what are your beliefs about learning? And then based on those beliefs, what are some of your practices? What do you plan to do, right? So, what are your beliefs about learning in general? So we've got several points here that we want you to take a look at, and we've got several examples. I point to my own learning philosophy, and I do write about learning quite a bit on my site. So, there's a lot of examples that you can see, but one of the key things that we want you to do is to explore the differences between a learning philosophy and the teaching philosophy. You don't have to spend a lot of time there, but recognize that you are focused on learning, not on teaching. Understand the difference. We also want you to take a look at some of the theorists that are out there. There is constructivism, behaviorism, cognitivism, humanism. There's a variety of different theorists, and the reason we want you to explore the different theorists that are out there and the different theories that are out there is that by looking at some of the fundamental theories, it's going to expand your understanding of what it is that you believe, and you're going to be able to identify key ideas that you can then apply to the practice of learning that you're going to be implementing down the road when you're working on your course design and a variety of other things. So these questions and this exploration really gives you an opportunity to really refine your thinking on learning. And I think it's a very useful process. So again, take a good look at these leading questions. Remember, the learning philosophy also has to be tied to, or you've got to make some connection to your innovation plan. How is that going to work? How is that going to impact your innovation plan? There's one other thing that is going to be important too. Because you're going to continually go back to the learning philosophy, you'll want to develop an annotated bibliography. And what that is a list of resources that you've looked at. Now, it's different than a reference list, because in a reference list, whatever you cite, you put in there. With an annotated bibliography, it's a list of all the things that you looked at. So, and the reason that you want to include that is you might not explicitly have a citation from a particular post or a page or a document or an article, but including that will help you to remember what you looked at in the past. So as you're developing your ideas and redeveloping and revisiting your ideas, you can take a look at that annotated bibliography and it can help you. So keep that in mind. The Four Keys document is a good document for you to take a look at. I just want to remind you, it gives you an overview of where some of the theories land, who some of the theorists are, and help you think about that. So, and also remember, on the program mapping page, this is where you're going to find a link to the assignment examples, and then the assignment examples. I'm going to probably deal with the first three or four, probably the first three, and it'll help you get an understanding of what you might want to be looking at doing. I'll identify, some of the strengths and weaknesses of the different approaches that these people have taken, and I think I'll point out things that you'll probably want to do. So I'm going to just touch on Michael's learning philosophy, and Michael always includes. He does a full write-up on his blog post, but he also has another document perspective. It's just what he does, and so Michael does a really nice job of just throughout his whole discussion pointing out that schools are a place to learn rather as a place to teach. And so implicit in his whole exposition of his learning theory is that there's a difference between teaching and learning, right? And he's creating a learning environment, and everything he does is focused on that, right? And so he points to different resources and different ideas to justify his position. He's identified himself as, involved in the learning, as hands-on, participatory type of a perspective, meaningful connections, constructing knowledge, and so, he finds himself tending to be a constructivist, and so he falls in that category, and he justifies that. And he points to John Dewey and Piaget and other people who who he aligns with, and he points to resources that support his thinking on that, right? And then he's got a connections to innovation plan and the full annotated bibliography or annotated references. So again, reference citation, reference list, and then a 1 or 2 sentence description of what the post is. So again, great example. It's not overly long, but it's his. He owns it. Similarly, Deanna's learning philosophy, I think she's done a wonderful job with this as well, and a little bit different, much more visual, lots of quotes, lots of images. She's focusing on Jean Piaget and Seymour Papert. Deanna is into maker spaces, and Seymour Papert could be heralded as sort of one of the founders of the maker movement, and she points to the slight difference between constructivism and constructionism, which is, we're splitting hairs in terms of constructivism. We are, but that's okay. But in this particular perspective, because she is a maker advocate, she really is pointing to Seymour Papert and his work, which really provides a foundation for the work that she's doing in building maker spaces, right? And so she identifies key aspects of her learning philosophy, points to a lot of quotes, real world learning, real world experiences, learners take control of their own learning. So everything is about that learning, active, dynamic environment. Everything's connected back to the learning theorists, and it's, she believes that this is foundational to creating that type of a learning environment, and so everything is tied together. Annotated bibliography, again, wonderful job. All the pieces are in place, and so I think she's done a really nice job pulling these ideas together. And the key thing with both Deanna and Michael's, and the next example is that this was hers. Michael's was his, and this is uniquely identified to what she is doing, right? She is pointing out the differences between the teaching philosophy and learning philosophy, but it's implicit in the work that she's doing. Chris's work, I think, is really enjoyable because she didn't. Here's one student who didn't really think about her learning philosophy. She's been a teacher for a long time, and quite often we take learning for granted. It was interesting to read through her journey, and this is really a reflection of the journey that she's gone through, and it was very, very personable, very enjoyable. She identified that she initially saw herself as a bit of a behaviorist, but then she realized, the quizzes and doing really good in school. Yeah, she did well with that, but getting straight A's, she did so through the behaviorist method, but she's also realizing that there was more to the stimulus and response, and so she was looking at the constructivist learning theory, and in particular, social constructivism or cognitive constructivism and Vygotsky's social constructivism. So she's identified some key things, and she talks about her shift that she made in her thinking, and identifying that she's a doer and a perspective on experiences, and so so her whole explanation is really relating her journey, and she sees herself and how she associates her beliefs with constructivism, and then she makes a connection to innovation plan. So again, another wonderful example of somebody who looked at herself quite specifically and has identified herself as a constructivist learner, right? So it's a wonderful example of sort of the journey that she's gone through to make these realizations. And she's got an annotated bibliography. The references are in place, and she talked about the different sites and the different pieces. So again, another wonderful example. So the key thing, and I think the key success that you want to look at doing, and the key aspect of learning philosophy, is that it's yours, and you do differentiate the difference between teaching and learning. And if you're a maker person who's into building maker spaces, well, then you've got to point to people like Piaget and Papert. If you are identifying yourself as a constructivist, well, then again, Piaget, Dewey, Bruner, people like that. You want to make sure that you're identifying those key people. If you have shifted from being a behaviorist and to move into other areas, well, identify, Skinner, Watson, the key behaviorist type thinkers that are associated with those theories. So, this is a wonderful opportunity to explore where you're at, make a connection to your innovation plan, and really get clear on where you land in terms of your learning philosophy.